Get more confidence, dates, and sex. Build the relationships and lifestyles you really want.
DatingSkillsReview.com presents a training program for dating with different world-class experts in every single episode, teaching you the secrets to their skills and success.
Dating Skills Podcast, the podcast for men.
Well, hey, this is Angel Donovan from Dating Skills Review, and today we have Daniel Rose from Sex God Method with us. Hi, Dan. Okay, so Sex God Method came out in 2006, and has been revamped and gone through a few different versions to its current second edition on ebook, and he now has a video online training program as well. And it's been very successful and quite widely published in the press. So it's really good to have Dan here to talk more about that.
Good to be here.
So Dan, I thought we'd just jump straight into kind of like the overview of your method, which is very different to a lot of the other stuff out there, which is very, very pinpointed techniques focused, whereas you had this overall framework which had a lot of psychology and had a completely different approach towards sex for guys. Could you give us an overview of that?
Yeah, sure thing, and that's actually a question I get a lot because there's a ton of sex books out there, so a lot of people are wondering, why should I buy yours? Basically what makes my book different is that, like you said, a lot of the books concentrate mostly on the physical side of sex, like the angles that you're thrusting into her or, like different ways to stimulate her with your fingers or something like that. My book is a little bit different, though, because it concentrates more on the psychological side. It concentrates on what I call her 4 mental orgasm triggers, which are 4 things that I know excite a woman psychologically. And the idea of my book is that if you give her those 4 things, then you can use pretty much any physical technique that you want, and she's going to have orgasms, and it's going to be great sex. I do teach some physical techniques too, but I would say, the main difference in my book is the emphasis on the psychological technique and the 4 mental orgasm triggers.
Okay, and those 4 mental orgasm triggers, what are they?
So the first one is dominance. This is one which a lot of guys in the dating community know about, but which a lot of mainstream guys is kind of a foreign idea to them. Women are really turned on by masculine, primal, sexual dominance. This is basically being a leader in the bedroom, taking control of her in the bedroom, and at times almost treating her like your property, which I know can sound a little bit demeaning if you've never done it before, but it can be very, very sexually pleasurable to women if you do it in the right way. So that's the first thing. Second thing is emotion. This is basically making her feel strong emotions during sex, whether they're positive emotions or negative emotions. Now, what I found out is that any emotion that she feels during sex is actually going to make it more intense. It's another counterintuitive idea, but you've got to be able to create strong emotions during sex for it to be good for her as a woman. Third is variety. This is basically mixing it up, always keeping sex fresh and interesting, not only on the physical level with using different sex positions and different techniques physically, but also giving her different types of sexual energy on the psychological level. Sometimes making sex really rough and dominant, sometimes making love to her in a really soft and romantic, emotional way. And sometimes making it very relaxed and almost having a tantric feel. And giving her those 3 different types of sexual energies and rotating through those is going to keep it exciting for her. And finally, as I mentioned before, the last one is immersion, and that's basically staying relaxed, staying present, staying comfortable during sex, and not getting overexcited or tense or nervous in any way. And this, I know, is a very simple concept, but it's actually one of the most important elements of sex, because once you really master immersion, then sexual dysfunctions such as erectile dysfunction and having an orgasm too soon will basically vanish. It'll be much easier for her to have an orgasm, and it'll be much more pleasurable sex for both of you. So that's basically it in a nutshell. Dominance, emotion, variety, immersion. Give her those 4 things. It's going to be great sex. Okay,
great. And for the guys you've coached and so on, which do they find the easiest to get their head round in terms of these 4 triggers and actually start doing, and which is the hardest?
I would say for a lot of guys, the positive emotions are the easiest because we've been socially conditioned to know that that's something which is going to sexually arouse a woman. Doing something which is more of a romantic, love-making energy. That tends to be the easiest, the most intuitive for a lot of guys. Probably the least intuitive is the dominant stuff. Stuff like, especially for guys, because most of the guys who come to me are really, genuinely nice guys who care about their girlfriends, care about their wives, and they want to give them pleasure. So it can be tough to understand if you've never done it before, how saying, you belong to me, you're my dirty little slut. It can be tough to understand how that can be pleasurable for a woman. But once you've done it and you've seen the reactions that it gets and how it really turns her on, then you realize that, by doing those things, you're really honoring her in a higher sense and respecting her in a higher sense.
Because as you say, it sounds kind of counterintuitive, and I can imagine a lot of guys go, oh, that sounds like too much for me. It's really out of character. And they're going to be like, well, that's okay for some girls, but, for my girl, she's a nice girl, and I don't think it's relevant for her.
Well, what I found is that... Yeah, and this is actually something that guys say a lot, too. So a few tips for that. First of all, you have to realize that I do believe that there are such thing as universal female desires. And you might think that she's a nice girl, but maybe she's only a nice girl with you. And maybe she does enjoy these things, and maybe if you introduce it in a way which isn't going to offend her, she would get a lot of pleasure out of it. So first of all, I would say don't dismiss it without trying it. And then second of all, I would say the way to introduce it, a lot of guys kind of screw this up because what they'll do is they'll take like the most crazy advanced, like, edgy sexual technique out of my book, like those, for example, with dirty talk, they'll try to be like, you're my dirty little whore right away as the first dirty talk line they've ever said, cold turkey just from that. And if you try to start with something like crazy advanced like that before you're ready for it, before you have the sexual confidence, that's when it comes off as weird. But if you start small, if you start with something with just, moaning or like making noises first, or just saying it feels so good to be inside you before, as the first thing that you say, that's impossible to reject. And from there you can always build up and say something a little more risque and a little bit more and a little bit more. So I would say, just start small and build up from there.
Are you talking about physical dominance only? I've heard you kind of like bring out like topics. It sounds like it's kind of verbal the way you're talking about dominance. Could you talk a bit more about that? Is it just verbal or is it physical as well?
Yeah, so I know like when a lot of people think about dominance, they think about like BDSM and like giving her electric shocks or something like that. What I found is that while that thing can work on some girls, for most girls that's not really the type of dominance they want. Really what they're after is the psychological sensation of being dominated, of having someone take control of them. And sometimes that involves a component of physical pain. But the most effective dominance I found give a heavy like impact of psychological dominance without an overwhelming amount of physical pain. For example, one technique I like to use all the time is called the door slam, where basically I'll be kissing her and then suddenly, with no warning, I'll take her and then I'll slam her back up against the door. And this makes a really loud noise. It really seems like she's being dominated, but it really doesn't cause her any pain at all because the impact is kind of distributed over her back and the door has give, unlike a wall, so it's not going to hurt at all. But it really makes her feel like she's being dominated without hurting her too much. And things like that I feel are the most effective types of dominance, things which provide the psychological side of dominance.
Yeah. I mean, I've got to say, I read your book a couple of years ago and with my buddy, actually, Cyber, and it really opened up the things we were doing, and I've seen crazy things over the years since, and it's been really great, but very very mind opening, and it was a gradual process, like you say. It was a gradual process of kind of getting out of your comfort zone. So for us, I think it was natural for us to go gradually, like we didn't just kind of jump in and do cold turkey, like you said. We kind of did a gradual process, especially with the dominant stuff, which is a bit tougher. But what I found, and I'll see what you think about this, is I have found that girls are receptive to it in different ways. Is that your experience, or do you think there's any type of calibration as to what you can do and what she's going to enjoy the most, or do you really think like that? It's just a matter of kind of like training or like easing into it.
Yeah, most definitely. I think there are different types of women that will react to the stuff in different ways. Probably one of the most important differences that we've been talking about in our members forum lately is the difference between women who will use what I've called playful submission and women who